Hello. Today's lesson is Lesson 9-1, our first lesson on fractions. It's called Dividing Regions into Equal Parts. You have learned how to divide a set of objects into equal groups. We've done division. Today you will learn how to divide a region into equal parts and name the parts. So instead of dividing a big number like 48 into 6 equal parts, we're dividing a region into equal parts and we're naming the parts. So I told the students eventually this means we're going to be breaking one number, the number 1, apart. And I talked about how fractions are related to the word fracture. When you break a bone, sometimes they say you fracture a bone. So what we're doing is we're breaking something apart when we're doing fractions. Name something that you've divided into 2 equal parts to share with a friend. Students talked about toys and food that they divided into 2 equal parts. We used graph paper today. One of the things we did with is we worked with a partner to find as many different ways as possible to divide a 4x4 region into 2 equal parts. So what I did was I had students draw a box around 16 squares on their graph paper, just like I have at the bottom of the slide. Show each way on grid paper. Color in one of the 2 equal parts with your pencil. Be ready to tell the class how you know the parts are equal. So we did a lot of different ways we could divide those 16 boxes, and then thought carefully about how we knew the parts were equal. First, students drew a line across, a horizontal line halfway down. Then they thought of drawing a vertical line. Some students realized you could do a diagonal. And then some students really got creative with interesting shapes. The question we kept coming back to was, how do you know the 2 parts are equal? And what we finally realized was, since there's 16 boxes in this square, if we have 8 on one half and 8 on the other half, then they are equal. There are lots of ways to divide an array in half. How are the ways we divided in half the same? How are they different? They're all the same because they all have 8 on each half. They're different because they're different shapes. We even got creative with strange looking lines that went up and down. One student divided one of these little boxes at a diagonal. So very creative ways to divide them in half, but they all have 8 on both sides for a total of 16. Let's see, somebody was wondering what happens if we divide a half into halves. So we talked about how a half of a half is called a fourth, and we even went into a half of a fourth, which is called an eighth. So then we had to find out what half of an eighth was, and it's 1/16, and so we talked about the pattern we were seeing. The denominator goes from 2 to 4 to 8 to 16. The denominator doubles, and we pointed out that the pieces get smaller. How strange. We'll talk more about that in other lessons. We looked at some pictures of halves and fourths and eighths. And this is one I found online that I just thought the students would like to see the different shapes that could be divided into equal parts. It's a very creative one. I think the triangle in the top right corner is my favorite. One triangle divided into fourths. Pretty amazing. Here's another one a teacher had that I liked, just showing how the fractions break down. Pretty cool. Did some practice problems, and I'll click through these pretty quickly. For each, you want to say if they're equal or unequal, and if they're equal, you want to name them. You're either going to say halves or thirds or fourths or whatever it is. So here's the first one. And this is equal, and we call it sixths because there's 6 pieces. Now throughout this, please pause the video if you need to think about it. For the second one, are they equal? No, they're not equal, so we can't name these. We cannot give these a name. These are not a fraction. We just stop after saying not equal. What about the third one? It's got equal parts, and they're 8 equal eighths. Here we have a triangle divided Divided equally in half, we call them halves. Here's another question. Amar divided his garden into equal areas as shown below. What's the name of the equal parts? There's 5 equal parts, so they are called fifths. We reminded ourselves that those words, the terms, are printed in the textbook. We talked about how to answer a couple questions. And that was it for today.